be sheep, keep flocking. You want to be wolves? Form a pack.
Welcome to the Dreams of Consciousness podcast. If you'd be so kind, would you mind introducing yourself?
This is Aaron from the band Wolves in the Throne Room. I play the drums, do the majority of the synthesizers and soundscapes, and the general wizard on the scene.
And Aaron from Wolves in the Throne Room, how would you describe the music of Wolves in the Throne Room? What is Wolves in the Throne Room?
Well, it's definitely coming from the genre of black metal, but perhaps that's a bit too limiting because I do feel as though Wolves in the Throne Room is doing a very unique thing within black metal. We have a very unique and personal perspective on what black metal is and how we work within that genre to do music that is very personal and very intimate. And perhaps the most important thing to understand is that it is music that is literally rising up from our landscape. Our approach to music is to be in connection and resonance and relationship with nature, and not just nature as a overarching entity, but to our specific patch of earth, specific mountains, specific trees, specific rivers. And these are spirits in our lives that we venerate and work with, and this is what inspires our music.
So in describing your sound, you use the word personal a couple times, but you also use the term black metal, which means different things to different people. Can you tell me a little bit about what black metal means to you?
Well, I can say this, that when I was a young kid, we first got into heavy metal through hearing the Black Album on the radio, the Metallica record in 1991 or 2, whenever that came out. And got into the Metallica's back catalog, discovered thrash metal, and then, metal just continues to open up and you find these other layers and subgenres and different perspectives. So after we were, into Slayer and Metallica and these things, got into the Florida death metal scene. And then shortly thereafter came across the Norwegian second wave of black metal. And when I first heard that music, I was entranced in a way, because this was the first music I heard that was overtly occult. It was overtly magical. It was very explicitly working within the realm of spirit, the unseen world, the world of magic and dreams, in a way that punk hardcore or even like Morbid Angel is not. Like Morbid Angels are really, they have this occult imagery, but it's essentially kind of a goofy put on. But in black metal, I heard actual music that was crackling with real magic. At least that's how I perceived it. The second thing I noticed is that when I closed my eyes and listened to In the Night Side Eclipse, for instance, or the first Ulva record, I would clearly visualize a landscape. I could visualize these dark pine and larch forests of Norway. I could visualize the midnight sun on summer solstice. I could visualize the fjords, the weather, the wind. I could smell it in the air. And I realized that it was music that was rising up out of that landscape. It was music that was channeling the spirit of the earth in a very specific place. And so that is the element in black metal that we have taken and used for our own purposes, to connect to our own landscape, connect to our own native spirits here where we live, where we've set down roots and made commitments to this piece of land, this bioregion. And it's a lifelong journey of developing right relationship to the earth in this way. And it's a beautiful way to work. I really appreciate it because it's a lifelong path. The cedar tree continues to open up to me. It continues to reveal more and more of itself as I spend these long years developing relationship to it, for instance.
Now, Aaron, you use the word entrancing in describing the feeling of listening to black metal, your personal experience with listening to black metal. Is that the feeling you want people to have when listening to Wolves in the Throne Room?
Well, I think the most important ethic that I have around music is that of personal freedom and personal choice. This is something that is a value that's in heavy metal across genre. It's a call to find your own truth in your own heart, follow your own path, choose that which you believe, what you want to venerate on your personal altar. And so for that reason, I don't want anyone to do anything with my music. I don't have an intention for the listener to respond in any one particular way. We put it out there as artists for people to listen to. And once we release it into the world, it's its own entity, and people can take the music and they can work with it however they wish. And so perhaps the only thing that I want people to experience is themselves, their own truth and their own freedom. And if our music can help facilitate that in any small way, then that's something that I find very gratifying.
Now, for you personally, do you find Wolves in the Throne Room's music to be entrancing or inducing a trance-like state?
Oh, yeah, of course. No, it's trance music through and through, both in the studio and in live performance. Indeed, when working in the studio, I have to enter a trance in order to be able to work effectively. Of course, there are times when, you're just moving files around on the desktop and try not to erase the drum performances and making sure you're using the correct hard drive, this sort of mundane kind of craftsmanship stuff. But when I'm doing the creative work, the artistic work, my method is to move out of the thinking mind and move my consciousness and awareness into the heart space or into the root space, which one might call that a trance, in that I'm operating from pure instinct and pure feeling, and I'm not being jerked around by these sort of ephemeral thoughts that come and go in the ego mind.
So I would like to talk a little bit about that feeling and working from instinct when we talk about your songwriting. Before we get there, though, I'd like to talk a little bit about the creation of Wolves in the Throne Room. You formed this band with your brother, am I right?
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah. What were your intentions at the time, and how clear of an idea did you have of what you wanted this band to sound like?
Oh, it was very clear from the beginning. I will credit Nathan with opening the door for Wolves in the Throne Room, perhaps planting the seed or receiving the generative transmission that blossomed into Wolves in the Throne Room. And it happened in a cool way. He was at a Earth First gathering in the Gifford Pinchot forest in the mountains of Cascadia, 2002, perhaps. And these were the days of, there's a strong culture around forest defense to protect the remaining old growth forests in Cascadia. And there was a strong underground culture around that. And this was an Earth First rendezvous up in the mountains where people were sharing skills about, the actual mechanics of forest defense, like how to do tree sits and how to dig up roads so trucks can't get through, how to resist the attacks of the police. But there was a magical and occult element as well. This was a time when people were opening themselves up to the spirits of the earth and listening, or beginning to listen to these voices coming from the land, or coming from the entities that dwell within the land. And black metal was a big part of the culture in those days, because there was a lot of people who were hearing black metal the same way we were, that this is music that is calling upon wildness, calling upon primal, ancient energies, opening up to older streams of wisdom and knowledge, perhaps ancestral streams, perhaps voices that come from the earth itself. And it was at this gathering that Nathan had this concept, like, aha, I should create a band, a musical entity that does this work, that expresses the magic and the feeling of Cascadia in music, and specifically in heavy metal or in black metal. And so that was the source. And I was drawn into the fold very shortly thereafter.
Let's talk about your songwriting a little bit. You mentioned being instinctual in creating the music for Wolves in the Throne Room. How do you approach a song? Do you start with a feeling? Do you start with a concept? Do you start with music? Do you have an idea of how a song will flow before you actually begin playing it?
Even though I play the drums in the band, I also write on guitar. Because for me, there's like a feeling that I'm trying to evoke, or there's a feeling that I have in myself that I'm trying to express. And it really is in melody and harmony. It's music, it's in the musicality of just the riff that the feeling is expressed. And so once we have a body of work that's very raw, we often refer to it as just ore, ore freshly dug out of the mountain that still needs to be smelted and then worked into something usable. But once we have this raw material, then we begin to do the work of forming them into songs. And at that point, a more cohesive concept for each song appears. And we refine both the feeling of the song, the lyrical content of the song, and then the production comes on top of that.
You mentioned you wanted Wolves in the Throne Room to be a personal experience for every listener. When I listen to Wolves in the Throne Room, the sense that I get is meditative, even during sections that have tremolo picking and blast beats. During these sections, which can sometimes last for minutes, how do you judge how long a section should be? When do you know that a section is long enough or too long or too short?
Yeah, it's purely a matter of somatic feeling. It's a feeling in the body of what feels right. Yeah, it's not an intellectual process at all. It's not thought out. It's when a certain feeling is evoked, then that's good. Another thing that is a guide for me is it's a visual experience, because for me the music is very much a visual. Creating it is a very visual process. I have images in my mind that I translate into music. And so both during songwriting and during the production and mixing process, I rely very much on my perception of color. For this record, especially, when things were coalescing, when things are correct, when things are the way they should be, they would turn a certain color in my mind's eye. And that's my signal to kind of stop fucking around with it. And I'm very grateful to have that capacity, because a lot of bands can really get stuck in these looping eddies of just not being confident in their artistic decisions. And that's why a lot of artists have to rely on a producer, an outside producer, to be the gatekeeper or be the person to say, no, that's good, that's bad. Let's keep that, let's move on. I feel really confident in my own ability to make those decisions for this, because I can just look at the color of it. If it's the right color, then it's good. And if it's the wrong color, then we keep working on it.
And when is a Wolves song done? When can the three of you walk away from a song and say, this is what we want to put out into the world?
Well, again, primarily it comes down to the feeling, the color. It just kind of comes together. It like in our minds, it no longer becomes this messy collection of riffs that are stitched together where all the seams are showing and all of the marks of the craftsmanship are still clearly visible. And it becomes something that is perhaps sleek, something that is polished. I think that's the primary way we make the decision. And there's more mundane elements to it as well. We listen to the song and we have a notepad and we write down anything that's wrong with it. And we just go back again and again and again until there's nothing wrong with it. And then we know it's time to move on.
And how much of that feeling comes from playing the song live, the three of you being in the studio together and playing the song?
None. We've experimented with different methods of working. And we tried to write this new album with us in the jam room, which is the way we did Diadem, Two Hunters, and Black Cascade. Those records were primarily written in the jam room. All of the riffs were written just on guitar. but then we'd gather together as a band and work everything out. And for this record, we tried that approach, and it didn't feel right. Primarily because we wanted this record to be very refined, and we wanted to have a very close attention to detail. And something about that jam room approach was a little bit too loose, a little bit too imprecise to be able to focus on these small details. But I think that'll change. We are going to do a little bit more work on our studio and begin to set up some microphones to start writing for future projects. And I definitely would like to return to more of a jam room approach to writing, because it's a great deal of fun. It's very pleasurable to play together. Definitely will evoke or create a different result.
So let's talk about this new album. It's called Primordial Arcana, and it came out on August 20th of this year. Tell me a little bit about your tensions with the album and how the songwriting process for this album differed from your previous album, Thrice Woven.
Well, I'd say two main differences. The first is that this is the first record where Kody has been involved in the songwriting from the jump. And I think that you hear a freshness on this record, a new dose of vitality and energy. And part of that I attribute to Kody's influence. He's just another man with another musical perspective. He, in his mind's eye, sees a different record than I do or Nathan does. And it's through the synthesis of our three visions that the album is created. The other important distinction between Primordial Arcana and previous albums is that this is the first record that we've not worked with an outside producer. All three of us co-produced the record, but I did the majority of the engineering. I'm the one sitting at the control desk, and I did the mixing on the record. And so this is, a very new process for us, especially for me, because in the past I've been used to the comfort of being able to sit back on the couch and let Randall Dunn, the producer we've worked with in the past, handle the minutia and the technical details of this or that, fix the million problems that emerge during the recording of a complex record such as this one. But this time I was the guy in the hot seat who had to solve all of those technical problems and at the same time still be fully in the magical and energetic flow of the record, and making sure that the heart intention of the music is always held as the jewel that we are focusing our energy and attention on.
I would definitely like to talk more about the recording of this album. Before we get there, you mentioned this is the first album that Kody contributed music to and was part of the songwriting. Can you tell me a little bit about how you met Kody and how he became part of Wolves in the Throne Room?
Indeed. I first met Kody a long time ago. We used to live on this old farm, and we would host concerts in the old barn there. And Kody was playing in a band called Fall of the Bastards. They were based, I believe, in Salem or Eugene, Oregon. They were good. They were like sort of a blackened crust band. But we didn't really connect then. And then in 2010, I had a wedding ceremony with my bride. It was a very epic heathen event. Hundreds of people were there, and Kody was at that wedding. And I don't know, I think it was on that day that we somehow opened up an energetic connection to each other. In some way, he was, a seed was planted that then grew into a very deep and rich and beautiful relationship. And starting in around 2010, Kody was with us on the road as the touring guitar player. Nathan and I would do all the work of, being the band, holding the space of being Wolves in the Throne Room. And Kody would just come with us on the road. But then as Thrice Woven was being recorded, almost at the tail end of that process, we all just realized that it was time for Kody to be fully initiated into the family, because he'd been with us for so long and because he really is on the same wavelength as Nathan and myself. For instance, Two Hunters and Diadem of 12 Stars, Rick Dolan played guitar. And I will never give him short shrift because he wrote a lot of riffs. He drew the Wolves in the Throne Room logo. He contributed a lot of energy to the creation of the band, but there was always a sort of spiritual disconnect in what we wanted the music to be about. And with Kody, that's not there. There isn't this split between me and Nathan on one side and then the other guy. Kody is fully integrated in Wolves in the Throne Room, and that's because we have the same spirituality. We have the same desires about what we want to create and call forth with our music.
How do you describe Kody's contributions?
Well, he's a great riff writer. He is good at two kinds of riffs, actually three kinds. He can make stuff that's extremely complex and almost baroque in its sound, 3 or 4 intertwining guitar parts. He excels at slow stuff. His previous band before Wolves in the Throne Room was called Aldebaran, which was extremely slow funeral doom, cosmic and astral in its orientation. And he's good at just a simple, direct riff as well. He's good at writing these riffs that don't have 3 or 4 parts. It's just one riff that really calls in the power of lightning. And he is a good balancer, I suppose. Nathan and I can both be quite reactive in our orientation, and Kody does a good job at just kind of like holding a middle ground and being able to assimilate and meld the perhaps more fiery dispositions of Nathan and myself.
You talked about this album being the first one that you recorded at your own studio, Owl Lodge Studios in Olympia. And you mentioned some of the technical, or having faced a few technical problems in engineering the album. What was the biggest challenge in handling the recording yourself or yourselves?
Well, I would say that making records is all technical challenges. There's always something, there's always something broken. There's always something that could be better, especially in a new studio like ours, where we've done a lot of work in here, but not a complete record. And so pushing sound through the hardware for the first time, it's like a maiden voyage of a ship. It's like a shakedown cruise. And so in some ways, we were kind of building the studio as we were working, which was challenging. We actually had to pause for a few months between doing the tracking and the mixing because we hadn't planned on mixing the record here. We built a tracking studio, and it was our intention to send the music we recorded to a mix engineer, which is in this modern time a very common way to make records. And we did so, and we got the mixes back from a very excellent mix engineer, and it was obvious immediately that it was not going to work. The record that we had crafted so carefully and put so much magic and feeling into had been destroyed, because I realized immediately that there's just no way that someone who's outside of our cult could work on the music with us, because we're working with very subtle feelings, as every artist and musician does. And for someone to just get a bunch of files over the internet and then be expected to keep that feeling and that magic intact is an impossible task. And so we realized, oh shit, well, we have to mix the record ourselves, which I had not expected to do. And so it took a few months of work on our studio, on both the hardware end, getting some more equipment, doing a lot of work on the acoustic treatment in the room in order to have a space that would be up to the task of doing the mix. And I'm quite glad that it turned out this way, because now the studio is fully operational to be able to do anything from the initial demoing all the way through to mixing and mastering.
What was the biggest lesson you learned in recording and engineering this album yourself?
I think that it wasn't a new lesson, but it solidified what I already had learned from my mentors, that the most important thing is to trust your initial instincts. And indeed, that's the only way to work. If you let yourself be pulled around by the thinking mind of, oh, is this good? Is this bad? Are the fans going to like this? Is this part too different from things we've done in the past? These sort of like mental loops will lead you into disaster and failure. And so the path forward artistically is to keep the consciousness, keep your power and your energy in your body. Use the mind as a tool to solve technical problems, to work effectively. But the mind is a tool that is wielded by the heart and the body.
There are a lot of elements, musical elements, keyboards, atmospheric elements that weave in and out throughout the album. How difficult was it to integrate these elements into your music and to find the right level as these elements play out throughout your songs?
Well, soundscapes are kind of my specialty. So that's my favorite part, actually, is it's a process of ornamentation. We record the drums and the guitars first, and we make sure that the song stands on its own without anything else. No vocals, no keyboards, no bass guitar, no mixing tricks, no nice reverb on the snare, just the raw riffs and drums. And once we are confident that the song stands on its own as a song, the process of production begins. And this is where the music becomes very three-dimensional and very architectural. I perceive each song as a space, as a building, as a cathedral that I enter in my mind's eye. And every element in the mix, whether it's a cymbal over here or a synthesizer over there or a guitar riff over there, is a physical object within the cathedral. And the process of creating all of these artifacts and then putting them into their proper place is accomplished by recording them, by layering them in the sonic spectrum, and then placing them within the space of the album, which is mixing. And so it's a bit of a magic trick, perhaps, to have this creation of architecture that is expressed through sound. And I certainly have an architectural experience when I listen to the music, and especially with headphones, because I don't mix exclusively for headphones, but I certainly am acknowledging that a lot of people enjoy listening to music in headphones because of the immersive experience. I am able to enter that space, enter this cathedral that we created in the recording studio, and say, yes, there's that one golden bauble that I left there on the central altar. Oh, yes, over here is a shaft of golden light that's coming through the stained glass window. It's a great pleasure to go back into these spaces that have been created in the past and experience them again by listening to the music.
So you made reference to Randall Dunn, who recorded some of your earlier albums, and in the past you've referred to him as a mentor. Can you tell me what you learned from Randall as far as producing and engineering albums?
Yeah. He is an engineer or producer who is primarily focused on the spiritual energy of a record. He's not a particularly technical person. Like, he's not a person who thinks in terms of frequencies or this piece of gear or studying up on different recording techniques. He's a person that holds a space for a record to be created, which is a magical act. It's like creating a container, a protected container within which the act of creation or art can occur. And there's a lot of tricks to do this. There's techniques to hold the space where creativity can unfold. And they're kind of hard to put into words. It's subtle things, and I think that every artist finds their own way of doing it. But it's crucial to do, because if as an artist you are just open to everyone else's opinion or everyone else's idea, well, then your music will not be yours. You'll just be creating a pastiche of other people's ideas. And that's not what we've ever done. We've been very focused on the idea of creating music that is purely arising from our own hearts and from our own vision. And to do that, you have to be protected. You have to create the boundaries around yourself and around the record, the space, both physical, energetic, magical, spiritual, where the record is being created.
So about a month ago, I spoke to Jana Beckris from Vuna, who recorded her last album with you guys. Is that something you're interested in doing? Are you interested in producing and recording other bands?
No, not at all. I've tried to do that a little bit, and it's a life's work. I think that to be a good producer to other bands, I would have to give up Wolves in the Throne Room. I'd have to devote myself entirely to that craft. And of course, Wolves in the Throne Room is my primary artistic endeavor. And there's no end in sight. We're like already thinking about the next record and the next record after that. And our studio is built for us. Yes, Jana recorded her record in here, but our studio is set up just for Wolves in the Throne Room. And a few very close allies, like Jana, of course, are welcome to work in here. But it's detailed and it's dialed in specifically for us and for the way that we work. If another band came in, I think they'd be a bit lost because, every band has their own way of creating and a producer needs to honor that. That's why if you go to a big recording studio that does everything from recording a big band to a singer-songwriter, they have to have racks and racks of equipment because every artist has their own sound. They have their own workflows. They have their own sonic needs. And a studio like ours is specifically detailed for us and for the very specific sound that we create.
So this will be your first album for Relapse Records, who's handling the release in North America, and Century Media Records is handling the release of the album in the rest of the world. Can you tell me how these two labels got involved with the release of the album?
We reached out to them. As you might know, we released Thrice Woven on our own. And it was a worthwhile enterprise to learn how to do that. We're a DIY band, fundamentally. We don't cede control or power to anyone over our music. And we felt like it was important to understand how it's done, like how to manipulate the system of production and distribution to make a record and then make sure that the fans receive their LP in a timely manner. But it was too much work, too many emails, And after Thrice Woven was recorded and that whole album cycle came to an end, it was just very obvious that we should not do that again. And so we reached out to Century Media first because we like what they do in Europe, and Relapse in the States because we like what they do in the States. And we just licensed the record to them so they can handle the production and distribution of the physical product. But we, of course, maintain control of the music and guide the artistic side of how the album is produced and distributed.
So Primordial Arcana is out now through Relapse Records in North America and Century Media Records outside of the US and Canada. Aaron, how can people order the album? What's the best way to get it?
The best way to do it is go to our website, WITTR.com. And from there, you can find our European store, our US store, all of the links to Bandcamp and the other digital platforms. As far as social media goes, we like to restrict our use of this particularly demonic and double-edged tool. So therefore, I make it a point not to spend too much time on it, but I do update our Instagram. That's the place where people can message us. That's the place where I tend to post stuff that is personal and coming from the band. So if you're interested in staying in touch with Wolves in the Throne Room, follow us on Instagram is your best bet.
Do you want to say anything about some of the physical releases that Century Media and Relapse are putting out? Some of the limited edition vinyl that they printed?
I could. Relapse and Century Media both did an excellent job in producing a very wide spectrum of beautiful LP editions. A lot of them are sold out, but I do know that we still have a limited number in our US store of the band edition that Relapse pressed for us. And in our European store, we have a very beautiful blood red edition in our Kings Road European store. So I'd encourage people to seek those out before they're gone.
Very cool. Aaron, is there anything else you want to say?
Always. It's true, man. Like I have this practice of gratitude every morning. I wake up, and the first thing I do is I remember my dreams from the night before. I do my dream journal. The next thing I do is I meditate on the immense blessings that I have received in this incarnation, in this human life. And first among those is this opportunity that I have to be an artist, to be supported by the people who listen to our music, by people like yourself who care enough to speak to me on a podcast, by the people who buy our records or come to our concerts. It's something that I'm very grateful for. And so I say thank you. I say thank you so much to you and to anyone who has supported Wolves in the Throne Room over these long years. It's a blessing to us, and we are always mindful of this great gift that we've been given.
Before I let you go, you mentioned that you visualize Wolves music as colors. If you had to pick a color or a series of colors that you visualize when you play or listen to Primordial Arcana, what would those colors be? Or what would that color be?
Well, if you go out into the forests around here, you'll come across the stumps of old growth cedar trees. In fact, in the woods right behind our studio, there's a number of these old stumps that were from trees that were logged off, about 120 years ago. And so these stumps, which are 8 to 10 feet in diameter, have begun to decompose. And so they are in this intermediate space between wood and soil. It's right in between, as this cedar very slowly decomposes over hundreds of years. And at this point in the decomposition process, the material is this very deep red-orange color. It's one of those colors that's very distinct and hard to describe, but that's the color that's in my mind. That's one of the colors that guides me during the mixing process. In fact, I can see it right now as I imagine Primordial Arcana. That's the color that comes to me. It's the body of these ancient giants in our beloved forests.
Very cool. Thank you so much, Aaron.
Thank you, Adrian. I really appreciate your thoughtful questions. It was a pleasure to speak to you.